After me and Yelena Belova had a wonderful day of sexual activity with each other, Natasha Romanoff finally tracked us down and she finally told me a secret she's been hiding from me for a while now. Natasha Romanoff really does get jealous when I have sex with other women, and then I said to Natasha Romanoff, if you want me to, I could divorce all my other wives and you and I can be the only ones in our relationship if that's what you want, and then Natasha Romanoff said, no, that would be very selfish of me since you had children with all those other women and you're married to them and I know they love you and I can't do that to them because I know how they would feel if I took you away from them and you can magically clone yourself anyway, so I want to keep the real you, Kenshiro, that's all I want. And then I said I understand, and then I kissed Natasha Romanoff passionately, and then Natasha Romanoff said, just a fair warning, you're going to have a lot of kids now, Yelena, and it's going to hurt like hell, and Natasha Romanoff smirked, and then Yelena Belova asked Natasha Romanoff reluctantly, how many kids, and then Natasha Romanoff said 5 if you're lucky, and then Yelena said, oh, it's not that bad, and then Natasha said, yes, you say that now but you just wait, and one woman he had sex with had 20 of his kids and her name is Aisha and she's gold alien and she's pretty much like a queen of the sovereign or something like that, and she was in so much pain that by the time she got done having his babies she wanted to die, and then I said offered to help her numb the pain completely but she said no, so I had no choice, I let her have our babies naturally, and after that she always tells me to use condoms during our sexual activity, and then Yelena Belova got a bit scared and she said, Jesus, he's that fertile, and then Natasha Romanoff said, honey, you have no idea what you're dealing with, but you will soon enough, because the last time I had kids with him I also had 20 of his kids, and trust me, that's very painful, but I got over it after he healed me really fast, and if he offers to help you numb the pain, take his offer. And then Yelena Belova said, yes ma'am, I will definitely do that, and then I said, it's okay, don't let her scare you too much, Yelena Belova, and then Yelena Belova nervously smiled and she said, I feel funny, I think I need to rest a bit, and then Natasha Romanoff said, it's already starting to heal you, and then Yelena asked Natasha, what's starting to heal, and then Natasha Romanoff said, your reproductive organs are starting to heal, dummy, because you had sex with him for a whole day and I'm assuming you continued screwing him even after he came inside your vagina, did you not? And then Yelena Belova said, I couldn't help it. It felt so good. It felt amazing, and then Natasha Romanoff said, yes, that's your mistake right there, you're definitely having 20 kids now, and then Yelena Belova looked very scared and she said, that can't be possible, regular human women aren't able to produce that many children with one pregnancy, and then Natasha Romanoff said, yes, under normal circumstances if you had sex with a normal human man you would have maybe 1 or 2 kids at the most, but Kenshiro is not an ordinary man, his DNA literally healed your reproductive organs and your children won't be normal either, but I don't want to spoil the surprise for you. And then Natasha Romanoff smirked like a villain as started flying the shield helicarrier again, and then Yelena Belova asked me, will you be there for the birth of our children, and I said, yes, of course I'll be there, Yelena, I'm always there for the birth of all my children and I always take full responsibility for my children and my family, and you will be no different. And then Yelena Belova sighed in relief and she said, good, and then I said, yes, I'll be there unless I need to save the world or something like that, and then Yelena Belova punched my arm and I said, I'm just kidding, relax, and then we flew to the prison where Alexei Shostakov is being held for whatever reason, and then I appeared inside the prison right next to Alexei Shostakov and I said, your daughters Yelena Belova and Natasha Romanoff sent me to get you out of prison. I'm here to help you. And then Alexei Shostakov said, oh, that's my ride, fellas, got to go, and Alexei Shostakov waved bye to all the prisoners and then he gave them all the middle finger and he said, goodbye dipshits, and then we appeared on the shield helicarrier with Natasha and Yelena, and while we were on the helicarrier I said, you should shave because we are also going to see your former wife, and then I threw him a razor and shaving cream and he said, oh yes, thank you, and then he asked me, are you a super soldier because you are a very big muscular man, and then I said, well, I'm a god actually, and my body has immense powers and strength surpassing gods, it pretty much means that I'm a lot more than a super soldier, and then he asked me about my Predator armor. So I told him everything about it.